What's up, Chumbags? Welcome to the HQ. My name is Kandula, and today I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Nick Sivak for a conversation with Jack Guffey. He's the creative director over at Heavy Thought Studios, and they just recently released their debut title called The Office Type. And we're going to talk about that as well as some other genre-specific stuff regarding, making a visual novel in 2025. And there's going to be a lot. We're going to zig and zag as we talk. But first, before all of that, Jack, how are you? How are you doing just in general?
I'm doing okay. Finally released a game been working on for a long time, and it feels nice.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the office type and kind of dig into that, just the kind of behind the scenes of it a little bit. But first, we're actually going to start off by asking a question that we ask each other every episode. So, what have you been playing? Anything, obviously you've just released a game, which has to be a lot, but, is there anything offline when you're, logging off the day that you're booting up?
As a game developer, I play surprisingly few games, but I do have to have like a bit of rest time to stay sane. So I tend to play things like Dark Souls or Subnautica, with the occasional bit of Minecraft to sort of settle
Sure,
things.
sure.
Right on,
Yeah.
balance that calm and cool Minecraft with ripping your hair out with Dark Souls, as all things
Yeah,
should
for
be.
sure.
So let's talk about this. You've just released a visual novel slash kind of match three game, maybe match a lot more than three game, and it's also a dating sim that's sort of like stationary objects that come to life. So I guess we'll start at the very top, right? Like, where did this idea come from in general? Just for the game.
Yeah, this is the question I get the most often. It's always fun to answer. One day I was sitting at my desk, I had a pen and a pencil next to me, and I had the random thought, what if these two were brothers? And it's developed into like, okay, if an object was a character, what sort of person would they be? What career would they have? And it eventually expanded out into an office setting.
I had a quick question to bounce off relating to the concept because as Sri kind of alluded to in the setup and also on like your website and everything, it talks about it's an inherently kind of a silly concept for a game, and I was curious if you found it challenging being able to strike a balance between telling like a more like goofy lighthearted story versus like a more deep and emotional one, because especially with the framework of like a dating sim, obviously that can cover a wide kind of variety of storytelling and writing types. So I'm curious if you found that it was difficult to kind of strike a balance there. Did you ever have like an idea that was just like, maybe not for this game? Like, what was that kind of process like for your team?
Yeah, so it was pretty difficult here and there. Um, this sort of game has a precedence. There's things like Hatful Boyfriend, the pigeon dating simulator,
Right.
Boyfriend Dungeon, where you date your weapons, things like that, where there's sort of like inherent comedy to it. Um, but in telling these stories for all these characters, it sort of needs to be deep. Otherwise, why you're like investing your time in all these
Sure.
stories? But we have so much content that we split up into these bite-sized pieces where most of it is comedy, and there's these a few paragraphs of deepness in there. And by the time you get to the end of it, you've laughed a lot and maybe you've cried a little. And it's broken up enough where it sort of strikes the balance on its own.
Now, this has been in work or in progress since 2018. Is that correct, or is that like the timeline?
Yeah, a very strange timeline for development. I had the idea back in October of 2017, but haven't really developed it until 2018.
Mhm.
But with getting the team together, personal issues and the pandemic, a whole lot going on. The
Yeah.
actual development time was probably 2.5 years. It's
Mm.
been a long road.
Yeah. No, it's finally out. So you've back in 2018, you've done a Kickstarter for the game and kind of started work. I'm guessing after that. Uh, how does that pressure work? Right, like on the one hand, I find that the idea of, I mean, we've done crowdfunding before, Nick and I,
Mhm.
and we kind of understand a little bit, but like when you're making something like this and the timeline is so long, and by the time the game comes out, it's 7 years later. And how does that work when you're developing the game? Is that like a good, okay, we have an audience that we have to make sure we're hitting to? Is that like pressure of like, shit, we have we have an audience that we have to we have to appeal to? Like, how do you feel it?
I mean, it is a bit difficult. You set up this goal, you have your idea, like, oh, I'll finish that in 2 years, no problem. And then life happens. Um, and it happens a lot with any development in general where there's that triangle of money, time, and energy,
Mhm.
and you're usually missing one or more of them. But with a fundraising campaign, that funded basically all of our art, like expanding the character art, background art, and we paid the voice actors from it as well. So everything else is sort of self-funded, my day job and odd jobs here and there. But without like a steady, like full-time studio, it is a bit difficult.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of on the topic of the Kickstarter, I was looking through the page and kind of checking out some of those older rewards. And one thing that I noticed for a lot of Kickstarters, because it is still kind of like a fairly common tool that I feel for like indie teams specifically to use a crowdfunding platform like a Kickstarter to get funding. And usually you'll see like the same kinds of things on there where it's like, a thanks in the credits and, art books, that sort of stuff, which I saw that was part of your Kickstarter as well. But the one thing that stood out were specifically the ones where backers could collaborate with the team and kind of either put in like a little reference or an Easter egg here and there, or even to the point of being able to work directly with you guys and craft like a bit of a scenario or something like that with the characters. I was curious from your perspective, what was that process like? Like, was that something that excited you, being able to work with like outside people with the community, or did it feel constraining at any point, trying to figure out how you were gonna balance all this stuff? I was really curious to hear your insight on that.
Well, the actual process of like, collaborating and discussing the ideas with people sometimes could be difficult. You don't know when people will respond, if that matches your development timeline.
Hmm.
But the actual like ideas were wonderful to see. Like people so excited about the concept, and they like saw the vision without seeing the full game.
Hmm.
And we have dozens of Easter eggs in there. I'm sure people who was supported it all those years ago will like see their little thing in the background, and it's very cool to see it come together.
Yeah, I think I picked up on a few as I was playing, but I definitely missed a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of more niche ones too. Is there one kind of favorite Easter egg that you like sticks out for you
A lot of people like the Michael Scott, Wayne Gretzky quote in The Office,
in
and
on the whiteboard?
yeah, we had to
Yeah.
change a bunch of names around for comedic effect throughout the game. Almost every pop culture reference has some tweak to it, but it's fun to see. Yeah.
We'll go with the concept some more though. As you're kind of putting out this story again, the general premise, without being reductive, is it's a dating sim with stationary objects that come to life. What was your like process of creating these? Like, how did you pick? I mean, there's a quite an extensive roster. It's a little bit like, if I'm being honest, when you're looking at it, you're like, it's a little intimidating because you only have so much time in one playthrough to get. You really have to pick. Okay, of these, I want to invest my time with these characters. So, like, how did you narrow it down from the plethora? Like, you could walk through, Home Goods or not Home Goods, Office Depot, and just be like, yeah, that one, that's a character, that's a character. Like, how do you cut them out to the essentials?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few fan favorites, before we had even like we talked about the idea with some family and friends and such, and everyone's asking like, "Oh, so I'm gonna be able to date my stapler, right?" And they're like, "Okay, that has to be on the list." But yeah, we had a big list of potentials that we sort of narrowed down of like one, what would you see in an office? But then like in terms of like popularity maybe, but we started creating ideas for characters based on the office supply, and that's what really mattered. You want to have a good character, not just like, pick random objects.
I really appreciate looking at all of the character art specifically, how you guys were able to adopt aesthetic like things here and there. Like, I noticed with like the pencil characters, like obviously, like it might sound obvious, but it's like, the color of the clothes match the type of pencil it is and stuff like that. So I guess I should ask, is that, do you find that difficult translating like an inanimate object like that in giving it personified like appearance? It's something that like I personally don't have much like experience like doing for any like project that I've ever worked on. So I'm curious, was that like a fun? I assume it was a fun task to try to kind of ideate on those concepts and try to nail down what these characters like actually looked like in the game.
Definitely fun. Uh, I mostly, me and my character development team created these little bits. I'm not such a great character artist myself, but we had the wonderful art of Epsy, who also worked on Dream Daddy, you may know. Those little bits, translating them from the object to the person, were really fun to do.
Were there any heated debates on which type of pencil or pen to base a certain design off of?
A B movie
Um,
script on the leggings has to stay.
yeah. I mean, there are a few that were a little difficult. For example, people may have noticed in our mouse pad set, we have Conrad, Madeline, and Addie. Addie being a metal mouse pad, and a lot of people are like, metal, like, is that a thing that exists? More so for like gaming and such,
Uh,
but meant to be like out of place in an office. But that translates to the character as well.
Now, this is going to be, shifting a little bit, but I'm curious. You mentioned a few kind of similar games to the Office type earlier. The elephant in the room, I'll say, is this game called Date Everything that just recently came out of just a few months ago. What was your reaction kind of going in to seeing was it at all like on your periphery in terms of like were you paying attention to this game at all? Or was it just like heads down, hey, we need to, get cracking on this game?
We definitely heard of it. I want to say we heard of it a year before release.
Sure.
Um, but it was really cool to see. Like it was, somewhat similar in the same genre, but we're all for having, other games in the same vein. So they started getting some traction on streaming, and we're hoping to be right there with them.
More generally speaking, as a developer, from your perspective, why is it that you think so many people do gravitate towards these types of games? Because it's not like a it's basically a genre at this point. It is like these types of games, like you mentioned, Hot to for Boyfriend and the and Date Everything and all that. But like I even think to things like I Love You, Colonel Sanders, and stuff like that, where it's like, these games that are dating sim visual novel elements, like at their core, but they seem to routinely get pretty popular, and people are very interested in diving into these types of games. So I'm curious from your perspective, like, what is it that you think players latch onto on that? Is it purely like the concept that you think sells it? Is there like a secret sauce or something like that that all these games kind of have that just people are like moths to a fire with?
Visual novels and dating sims in general, you'll often see them focused around a theme, and it's sort of the same thing where you'd see a cool cover for a book in a library. Like there's something you attach to. You don't just like randomly pick it up and like read the back. You're like, oh, this sounds great. People sort of like half invest themselves in the concept. And then as they start to play it, they understand like, oh, this is what I was looking for.
I'm curious because between the two of us, Nick is the Souls like expert. He'd probably be able to have a better conversation with you about Dark Souls. But I think I'll pace him in visual novels. So for me, I'm very fascinated with this genre. It's one that I've personally also wanted to kind of explore myself. And so, what was your reasoning? Like, was there ever a moment that you wanted to explore a different kind of medium for this specific type of game, or like kind of like, I mean, your debut game? Was there ever a moment where you were like a different direction with it? You know, a tactical RPG or some other genre? Or like, what made you stick with visual novel instead?
Well, I have a lot of ideas. So I think we settled on visual novel dating sim just because there's a big opportunity for storytelling. I'm mostly a writer, and putting those stories in an office setting sort of reflects reality a little bit. You see the kinds of people who are just like go-getters in their career, or maybe they're working on a side hobby, and there's
Sure.
so many stories to tell within that setting that I thought it was a good opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, if you've worked in a corporate setting, you can definitely like you start the game and you're like, oh yeah, I know that's Bill. I know Bill. We all know a few Bills. Was there ever like a different variation of this game? Like, I mean, like I said, you have the visual novel aspect, but then there's also, uh, I believe they're skippable, but they are like in the game. It's match. I'll say match three again, but essentially as you're playing the game, for those of you who haven't checked it out yet, you can essentially like drag up or to the side, and as you do, you kind of pick up any adjacent tiles along with it, and it'll kind of like do one large hit combo essentially. And you fill up the meter, and the more effective your combos are, the faster the meter will fill up, and then you progress with the game. So with that, like, was there ever a different thing that was in there? Like, what a different mechanic, perhaps? Or was it just like this was the one that you wanted to throw in there?
We considered a few. I don't think we did like an overarching like genre change at all in our
Sure.
ideation, but we consider having like different mini games for each character.
Mm.
But with 24 characters, making 24 polished mini games would be a
Right.
bit difficult. So it mostly became like something to break up all that reading, even though each date is maybe 5 minutes of reading. Um, if you're just reading 90 dates in a playthrough, it might get a bit much.
The skip function that Sri alluded to there, was that more of a decision to try to keep the people that are interested in the story and furthering that like connected to that part of the game, or was it more so just like, not everybody is maybe into the game for the puzzle aspect of it, to give them the option to do that? Was it like a player choice kind of thing driving the decision to include that?
A little bit of both, I would say. There are some people who don't like match three games at all, who definitely want to skip it or just like play as quickly as possible to get through it. So we decided to make an option where skipping it just gives you a perfect score essentially, and just moves on for the moment.
You said before we started recording that you're into Dark Souls, and that just makes me think about the unending discussion about creators' intent with difficulty and stuff like that. Do you foresee, the intent for this game to be go between conversations and puzzle solving, or is the intent whatever, the audience decides?
I mean, ultimately, it's in the hands of the player, I suppose. I hope to see more people who have been enjoying the match three game. People seem to like it a lot. Also, like there are things like you mentioned, Dark Souls sort of slipped in there. You would really like Cyril's story, which is if you played Dark Souls at all, people would recognize a lot in that storyline.
Right on.
Interesting. It'd go over my head, but I gotta
Yes.
get Nick on it.
Sri's a bit of a Souls newbie still. His first FromSoft game was Night Rain, which was a very interesting thing to try to hop into.
But I adapted fast, and that's what matters.
Yep.
Uh, it's we'll talk about it, I guess, a little bit more because yeah, we return to this concept that you like to play Dark Souls or just kind of on your time off. Is there anything mechanically related to your preference there of like you listed Minecraft and Dark Souls, which are like mechanic heavy games, and then a visual novel is like, hey, let's get you through the narrative. Like the focus is like even with the skippable kind of mini games, like the focus is we want it to guide you through this narrative, and obviously the narrative will adapt to the choices you make of who and what you're talking to and stuff. But Yeah, what's the correlation there? You just trying to is there any scope creep goes in between playing one to the other?
I think it might be actually the opposite, where I really enjoy technical things in my spare time. In terms of ideas I want to present to people, I'm really like a cozy game person. I can focus on building a 100,000 block castle in Minecraft. But if somebody like wants to play my game and just like, just 5 minutes on a weekend afternoon, just jump in. I like that style.
It really is like the picking up a book, just giving it a read.
When I was looking at the website and like kind of checking out the team and everything, I noticed, understandably so, that there are a lot of writers that contribute to this game. And with the 24 different characters and everything like that, that's that requires a lot of writing and just support to be able to build that kind of stuff up. I'm curious, just like at a basic level, how do you keep things organized from the writing end of the game? Like, is it like, every person has like their character that they're responsible to, and then you all kind of like fold into this sort of like, I don't know, like spreadsheet organization or something like that? Like,
Master Doc. Yeah.
you're like, how do you keep everything straight when you're dealing with that many different characters and storylines?
Yeah, I mean, we had many wonderful writers and editors, and with 24 characters of a content, it's a lot to manage. But yeah, I would say each person sort of focused on their character. Maybe they had two or three characters to work on, and then an editor who had worked on one character wouldn't edit their own thing. They would switch characters, collaborative documents online. Pretty much all the work was remote, so very free form, like editing as dates were created and sending them off to sensitivity consultants and such. It was a lot of iteration.
Well, what was the game developed on? Like, what engine were you guys using?
We use Unity.
Oh, okay, okay. I'll refrain from asking the obvious questions about your reactions to recent events regarding Unity. Uh, yeah, so okay, you made it on Unity, and then and also like you're a Chicago-based studio, but it's remote. Like Chicago is just the heart of the company, but you're kind of I assume in a work from home scenario, just a global entity, as right? Like that's the you work
Yeah.
with everyone. Uh, yeah. What's the collaboration like? Well, working with Unity, was it just like who's the person that was like the contact? Because you're the creative director. So who like was there like a developer that was like in the weeds coding that you had to ship off the pages and pages of writing to?
Well, we were lucky enough to have a great programming team from Chicago, my
Oh,
alma mater, DePaul University. A lot of good talent there, where they were handling like the technical aspects, and I was like feeding in art and content. It's sort of an interesting process to be remote for pretty much everything. It's a bit disjointed, maybe, but it's a more freeing environment to work in, I think.
you said you had a day job as well, and then is that an in person affair? Like are you going in for that?
That is also remote, thankfully.
Oh, okay, okay. I was gonna say, like, how does that work? Like, there's like an inherently collaborative nature to just even if you're an indie developer, kind of working on a small team. I mean, I guess even on a small team, it's even more so collaborative. But yeah, like, would it be better? I feel like that's what would be going through my head. I occasionally think about it for us because like we're like a small like team, for Respawn Station, and then occasionally I'm like, man, imagine we had just a place where you just go and be like, all right, let's focus, let's get things done.
Hmm.
But would that help or impede? Because there's sometimes where I'll be completely away from the office, but I'm like able to like, oh yeah, let me get this down on my phone.
There's some ideas of like one day we'll have a big office where people can work remotely or in person if they want to. In the meantime, remote work is definitely helpful, especially for I do quality assurance for my day job and then testing and story writing essentially for the office type. And that's sort of a better environment for now. And that sort of comes across in the story as well, in the office setting.
Sort of touched on it earlier, but this is a debut release for Heavy Thought Studios.
Congratulations, by the way. I feel like we
Yes,
haven't we skipped that
congratulations.
stone. Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
huge. How is the team overall feeling? Like, is it a weight off the shoulders to finally have it out? Is it exciting getting feedback in, or is
Or
it
then like
just like,
working on updates, and like is it still like heads down? We keep marching. Like,
It's been a long journey. It's cool to see, out in the world, people enjoying it and streaming it and such. Me and the programmer team are sort of heads down working on bug fixes and things like that. But it is a big accomplishment. 24 characters worth of story finally out there. People seeing the character they wrote it or edited for being like somebody's favorite character. That sort of thing is very cool to see.
has there been a particularly like memorable moment that you've had since the release that I'm guessing yes from that smile as
Yes. This may or may not have been on purpose, but the first intro scene where you meet the first two characters, one of the pens and one of the pencils. A lot of people ship them with each other, and then they discover they are siblings, and they're like, "Oh, hold on,"
oh.
and it creates a lot of funny moments there.
The game also launched, right? So it came out on Steam, and it's also available mobile as well. What was your like process between like the like how was just like porting a game like that, going one to the other?
Yeah, we originally intended it to be for Steam, Mac, and PC. That was sort of like the main platform with hopes to port it. But we were lucky enough to get an Android porting grant in collaboration with Queerty Gamers through Google Play that sort of helped fund the porting itself, which is something we wouldn't have focused on otherwise at the start. But I think it was a very rewarding experience to see what goes into mobile developing, and now it opens up the opportunity for iOS as well.
I was curious, whenever that decision, or I guess whenever that grant came through, to be able to port to mobile, did that have like any significantly tangible kind of design challenges that you had to overcome? Like, I imagine something like UI has to change between like PC platforms and mobile. I think the genre choice that you all went with was would have helped in that regard, because being able to follow a story through like a visual novel type structure, and then also having the puzzle gameplay. I feel like that those could probably adapt to something like a touchscreen, for instance, a bit better than turning a third person action RPG into a mobile port, right? So I was curious if there was any sort of like, or I guess what sort of kind of considerations did you guys come across when that choice was ultimately made, like, hey, we're going to do a mobile port as well?
There were some different considerations. I would say screen size was a big one,
Hmm.
where any small text, like during the roster selection,
Mm.
now had to be much bigger, and scrollable areas and such. Button layouts may be a bit different. There's no escape key to work with, so you have to make an escape button. But thankfully, in the main story, we already had an enlarged text option, so that sort of helped with most of it.
Was there any spillover of regarding, like did like the mobile port kind of influence any major thing about the Steam version, or kind of, I mean, obviously the Steam version is kind of the big one, so obviously it dictates everything about the mobile port, but any spillage from the other side?
Yeah, I think it opened up testing a lot more, where something that worked on
Oh, okay.
Steam may not work on mobile, or there's new technologies like phones that flip after like having altering
Yeah.
the screen dimensions, things like that, that were a bit hard to manage. That's part of
Oh
the
man, that's
rewarding
that's
thing of
such a I didn't even think about those freaking flip phones. I mean, that totally it's like a 4:3 aspect ratio essentially. You're playing this in like it's like a cinema. Oh,
yeah,
how
and certain with Google, for example, we had to have very specific like things to check before we could even like put it up for release.
what was easier, Steam or Google Play Store?
Steam, but thankfully
Oh,
we were actually like able to figure out Steam basically completely before like jumping into mobile.
So like the screen size being like a specific consideration that is brought about through porting to mobile. When you're trying to, I guess, problem solve these kind of things, right? Whenever you are trying to figure out, okay, like, our text is too small. Like, is that like an easy process to go in and kind of adapt all of that stuff? Or do you find that you, like, in certain situations, you would have to, like, adapt content to fit, like, a restriction kind of like that? It's something that I've not really, kind of like Sri said, I've not really considered, like, that physical space being a constraint on, like, storytelling and stuff like that. Is that something that you came across, or was it more so like, you just resize the text and it's fine?
We definitely came across that because on the design side, you would think like, oh, the text is too small, just up the size. But then suddenly it doesn't fit in the box anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so like new mechanics had to be developed to make those designs work, which was a fun challenge, but definitely not as simple as one would hope.
You don't realize as like console gamers or PC gamers where you're typically working on a certain size of a screen, a certain aspect ratio that it's going to mobile is just, it's a wild west over there. Anything can go. You got those tiny little phones with those, it's just, yeah. Okay. That's an interesting challenge I wouldn't have expected. All right, so we'll go back a little bit to the actually. First of all, let me actually throw this in there as well. I always like to get a little scoop if I can. Is there any plans to get the game to other platforms or anything like that as of now, or are you just is the Steam and Google Play Store? I mean, you mentioned iOS, but I'm saying like externally.
We would like to, I think. A lot of people seem to want it on Switch, but the problem there is
Me being one of those people.
sure, um, anything that is not touchscreen based, then has to be adapted to controller. It
Oh,
has you have to have like selecting reticle maybe or like things
Mhm.
like that. Though there are things we can do. For example, Steam Deck might be pretty easy because things that already have a touchscreen is basically the same as mobile. But in terms of like following the requirements of like what does the platform need to release it, that's the more complicated part.
Mhm. For me, also, the idea of dating sims, because like straight, like he said up at the top, he's more of like our visual novel kind of guy. He's played a bunch of these types of games. It's a genre that I am less familiar with, dabbled here and there, but the puzzle side of the game is what appeals to me a bit more. My gameplay monkey brain, I'm big on Tony Hawk and stuff like that, Tetris, get into the game and play. So that's kind of the element of the game I'd like to drill into a little bit as well here. And first of all, I thought it was a nice design, I guess a concept, to have them be like sticky notes and stuff. And I thought that really tied in your game design really well with the being able to move them around and like collect the other notes as you're moving, along the grid and whatnot. For coming up with an idea like that, because I even just mentioned Tetris. Puzzle games have been around for almost since the start of the entire concept of video games. Is it hard designing an idea like that and being like, did anybody else do this already? Like, is this a mechanic that is present in, like, some Japanese only, puzzle game on the Famicom? Like, what was that kind of like?
It was definitely consideration of like, has this been done before? So, there's a lot of overlap in different games. But to my knowledge, I think the sticky note mechanic hasn't been done anywhere
I was gonna
else.
say I can't think of it in anything that I've seen personally.
In terms of making it, we just wanted to try something new. I honestly I don't know where the idea came from. I get half my ideas from dreams and such. But yeah, we didn't like search through all the different dating games to see if it was similar.
Sure.
We just tried to like work on something that people enjoyed.
And it always works out well when you have a mechanic that is can be so visually, connected to the gameplay, right? It's one of those things that makes sense. It's like a sticky note. Yes, they should stick to things. Yes, they should grab the other things. And, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. I'm giving you a compliment that I think is a really cool idea.
And you got to take it, all right? You got to accept it. Yeah. Okay. Well, kind of go back to visual novels maybe in a second, but let's get to Heavy Thought Studios. I won't pressure you guys too much. You've just put out your first game. It's time to still be eating the cake. But you got any ideas for like, what's the next Heavy Thought game coming out? And is it don't consider this a pitch, but is it perhaps a kitchen themed version, or like another themed, another space themed version of this particular design style?
I mean, there are dozens of ideas that, throughout the future career that's sort of
Right.
lined up. But I feel like we might split out in like if there's more dating sim things to be done, that might be like a separate project or different company perhaps. I don't know if I'm ready to reveal the big
Sure,
idea that we're
sure.
doing next, but
Oh, okay. So you
um,
have you guys do have it though. Like you're locked in. You know where like the train's gonna go.
yes.
Okay.
Depending on resources, there are a few things we might do at the same time. I will say,
Oh,
uh, what you suggested is not too far off,
okay,
but that may
okay.
not be the main focus of Heavy Thought. Heavy Thought is more like these grandiose ideas. Maybe takes a couple years, but we also have some big ideas there.
Nice. Are you like do you trust the Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign process enough, or is it like would you guys kind of pursue that way again, or like maybe a publisher or
I mean, I feel like either way it could go. Kickstarter and other fundraising is very helpful for making a vertical slice of a game, something pitchable. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. I want to finish up
right,
polishing
right.
the office type first, but
Right. No, I won't pressure you anymore. Don't worry. All right. So okay, we'll get back to the visual novel thing. Just kind of as a genre. Again, it's a genre that I find endlessly. I mean, even the last episode of the podcast, which I don't expect you to have listened to because it's not out yet. So it's impossible for someone else to have listened to it. But I'll quickly say, like, I find this the intersection of this genre is so unique in terms of a book and a video game. And it kind of, I was playing another visual novel that I think really stirred this idea in my head of like a visual novel does things that you cannot do in a typical book and you can't do in a video game, like, or like a typical video game. What I mean by that is, you know, in a book, you can obviously have as much monologuing as you can, or you can go into that character's head and you can kind of deliver very like, hey, this is how this person is feeling, or like, those kind of things that like Geralt can't be having those. Like Geralt can't be just walking around the world going like, oh man, I'm forlorn light right now, man. Like, he's not just gonna. But then books don't just. I mean, I think there are some maybe like niche books, but like by and large, you don't pick up a book and you go to page 50 and it's like, oh yeah, this character died. Let's try that again. Start reading from the start again, and maybe they'll like live by the time you get to page 50 again. So it's a very unique like dissection. Is that what draws you to like, or not just that specifically? Like, is there a reason why like you find the visual novels draw you in, or is it that, or is it something else that kind of catches your interest? Obviously, as a writer, as you said.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I like writing of all kinds. I have both like a novel writing and a screenwriting background, but a visual novel is sort of a mix of both, where you're telling a story. There's some like inner monologue from the player character, but you're showing through the character art, the poses, the facial expressions, the voice acting. And I think it really helps as well. We have a feature in the game where you can choose the type of relationship,
Right.
like a
A
dating
friend,
relationship,
intimate, or
friend, yeah.
what was the other one?
So,
Friend, intimate, or something else. But there's three.
uh, yeah, relationship, intimacy, and friendship.
Okay,
Um,
got it.
so you can sort of choose the tone you're looking for, and you can mix and match or double up with characters however you'd like. And you're sort of shaping the book you're then reading, and sort of seeing it play out in real time.
And it's also like I won't kind of harp on just my how cool visual novels are. I promise. But when we talk about something like there's a general kind of misconception around visual novels maybe a little bit of stink, I'll say. I'll go on a limb and say that, because there's this kind of like, oh, like it's not really a game, and there's like there's this kind of conversations that you hear. I'm not going to say it's like significant, but it is definitely a thing that you have to kind of, if you're in the space, you can't really miss it, right? So how do you deal with those kind of, well, have you faced any of those kind of like criticisms just kind of going into trying to sell this game or pitch this game? How do you deal with that kind of, just that thought? I mean, obviously, like, I get it, you get it, Nick gets it, but like, the average person might just kind of look at it at a surface level, might not understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a visual novel, especially ours, is very much like you either like it or you don't. I've seen people who jump in, they're like, I'm going to play this whole thing right now. 12 hours, and then you can replay it 8 different times to choose all the different characters. But I saw there's some people who are like going through the first scene and they're like, this is too much reading, and then they just switch to a different game.
Yeah,
That's part of it. Not everybody likes every book.
it's got to be a little
There-
frustrating, though. I imagine just being like, just give me, stop, get off of fucking TikTok, all right? Play the goddamn game for 10 minutes.
Well, it's such a
Yeah.
funny like criticism when you extrapolate it too, because it's just like imagine somebody going into like Mario and being like, "There's too much jumping. I don't want that." It's like, well, you kind of know when you're going in, at least at some level, what type of experience you're gonna go for, I guess. So it's just always a funny kind of criticism that pops up that everybody in the gaming sphere seems to have on one thing or another.
There's sort of the opposite end of the people who want to play it 8 times. There's
Mhm.
it's not necessarily intention. It's not our intention for you to like see every bit of the content, but every person can sort of choose what they're looking for, and it could be totally different from a route that other people chose.
Something you said there about it's not entirely your intention for everyone to see everything. I feel like that's also a discussion that a lot of like even big AAA games, like are you meant to see and experience everything in this game? Whatever meant means. Like is that, I guess that gets back to like, designers' intent and stuff like that. I'm curious with that angle specifically, knowing going into it that you don't expect everybody to see it, but it's there for those who do want to seek everything out. Does that cause any sort of issues when you're trying to scope the game, I suppose? Because you landed on, the 3 different types up to 24 total characters, right? And they're segmented out into these different stationary types and everything. Was that like initially thought of that like we want to build around replayability, and how much of that kind of influenced that final number slash scope of content? Like was that you just kind of you mentioned earlier bouncing ideas off of family members and everything like that? Was it more so a line of like people just aren't interested in these other types of stationery, that's where we kind of put up our this is our goalpost here? Or is it more so this is realistically what our team is able to achieve with our highest
A
level of
launch date
quality?
in mind.
Yeah.
We thought from the start that some people would or wouldn't like certain types of, like if somebody likes a number 2 pencil, they may not like the charcoal pencil. That's, just player choice. We also sort of set it up where someone could stream the whole game. They could play an entire playthrough, and there's still 21 other stories that other people could then buy and play.
Hmm.
So we sort of like created these characters and then sort of fell in love with them. Um, and yes, we could have scoped it down and only had like one of each type. But the whole idea with the office type was to have that choice to choose what you're looking for in a dating sim.
And real quick, something else that you just said there also sparked an idea, and that's somebody could stream the game. And that's something that I'm endlessly curious about currently in like the time that we live in games, right? Is how much of people are going to stream this? How much of that was like a driving force across the development? Did you always envision like if like people can stream this, then it's going to be an extreme boon to this game, or is it more of like a, you had the concept, you knew that you were making it for, a specific type of player, and streaming kind of entered the equation later on?
I think it did enter the equation a little bit later, but definitely several years ago, like 5+ years ago. We knew we had so much content, and we had seen people like try out the demo, and they're sort of like getting their chat involved, or people in their chat are like telling them, "Oh, this is my favorite character. Go this way, go that way." And it was like a community event almost. So we saw like from there that streaming would be a big help, and sort of incorporated that into our like marketing and such.
As someone who did stream it myself, it is a fun ride to kind of go on and kind of see it all unfold, I suppose, in real time. I wasn't expecting to be addressed like that directly, but I appreciate it. I think that the idea, of kind of having all these ideas, well, the idea of having ideas, that sounds nice though. Just the concept of having all of these moments for each of these items. The more you have, I think you also kind of, in a way, right, dilutes the what the player will see, right? Like if you have less characters, there's only a certain amount of paths that you can kind of you're maybe a little bit more controlling of what the player experience is and all the moments that they'll see. Whereas if it's 24 versus like 12 or even 48 or whatever, you know, how does that dilution work? Of do you have the same, like, is it as the scope for the game grew, or maybe you were tightening it down? Were you working with these, like, each one has its own key moment that we're gonna, you have to hit this one for this one and this one for this one, or is it like you're swapping it around because, hey, like, the number two pencil only has 2 3 moments that are like perhaps maybe significant that we need to kind of swap out?
Yeah, I mean, behind the scenes, it's a lot more technical than people might realize. For example, we've set it up where there's a significant moment on, I believe, date 11, date 15, and then the last date. So depending on if you choose like a focusing on 3 characters, 6 or 8, you still see those moments. So you're supposed to focus on 3 at a time. Um,
You can't stop me.
We also separated out the game into focusing on personality, career, and hobby, and sort of mixing those up. But yeah, developing for 24 stories was a bit difficult, sort of making it all mesh together. But we had a stellar writing and editing team, so we made it work.
Sort of as I'm kind of winding down my end here with the couple questions I have. Specifically, I wanted to talk about content because you talked earlier about sending stuff off to like intimacy professionals, or I forget the exact term that you used there, like coordinators, people that focus on
Yeah,
that.
sensitivity consultants, yes.
Yes, thank you. What is that process like? Like, is that something that you send off some stuff to get checked over, sort of like an editor, I suppose, and then they kind of give you feedback to try to shape it, or is it like more so like direct notes, like this can't work in this circumstance? I'm curious what that kind of part of the collaboration is like.
Sure, it's almost like having a third editing team, where a person writes a
Sounds
story.
terrible, actually. That's too much.
I mean, it's very helpful to sort of refine it. I see it almost as like, not to compare the game to like a diamond in the rough, but to have this thing that is originally created, an editor shapes it down, sensitivity consultant further refines it and points out things that might need to change, goes back through editing, and then you sort of create this final version.
All right, so like Nick said, we're hitting the hour, and we got to let you go at some point. And I think we've gotten quite a bit of interesting behind the scenes from you so far. Is it? I mean, is it nice to talk about this? I'm curious. Like, are you like, what's your perspective on actually having to talk about? It's like spill the beans. Are you like, get the hell out? Stop talking about who cares how it's made? Just enjoy the food, goddamn meal.
No, it's very interesting. I'm not a very social person. Maybe it comes across in my speaking, but like no one never asks about this level of detail. It's very cool to share it.
All right. So we'll hunker down. We'll double down on this, Nick. This is exactly how we have to tackle it from now on.
Yep.
I'm gonna hassle everyone that comes onto the show for exclusive scoops on what they're working on next. Um, but no, obviously, look, there's kind of a lot of ways we can take this conversation to kind of wrap it up. But I'll ask you kind of a few lighter ones. We've grilled you a little bit. Um, I'll start with perhaps the easiest one. All right, what office supply do you personally find yourself the most? What do you connect with the most? It can be on any three of the intimacy levels, or friendship, intimacy, whatever. What do you personally prefer?
Difficult question.
Ah, there you go. We're
Uh,
still grilling them.
yeah. So I mean, I wrote for Cyril the charcoal pencil, so there's a bit of me in that. But I was also like helping to review every character, so there's like little bits of the writers' lives in each character, including mine. But I feel like I might resonate with Mosin, the desktop stapler.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Seems to be a fan favorite and a favorite of mine as well.
Mm. Okay, okay. Look, this has been a long time coming. Obviously, with just how long you guys have worked on this game. Uh, First of all, you know, I think this is a kind of a perfect case for the collaboration between I think like an indie outlet and an indie game because you guys reached out and this game wasn't previously on our radar, but then here we are having this conversation. We've checked out a game that otherwise we might have actually missed, and hopefully that we pass that forward, right? Like hopefully people who are listening to this and are like, wait, hold on, what is this game? And then you can go down in the description, you can click it, check it out for yourself. Um, so man, like how are you feeling now? Like everything's kind of, I mean, you're not done the game, all right? There's still work to do. Tomorrow's Monday. I hate to break it to you, but like what's the like? Yeah, how's just your feeling? You as the creative director, and you've this Heavy Thought Studio has gone through a lot over the last 7 years as you guys went from crowdfunding to working through a pandemic and all of that. How's it going?
Feels good. I keep trying to tell myself that like this is a big accomplishment. Like I worked really hard on it. We have more than 70 people who worked on this in some way or another. Big accomplishment for them as well. I feel like there's so many ideas still left to make that I'm still in work mode perhaps, but I'm trying to like take it one step at a time and be like, you made something and people enjoy it. And that's very nice after all this time.
Yeah, and it's a finish line that a lot of people won't can't cross, and I think it's become more accessible now with just kind of being able like softwares like Godot or something where it's or maybe open source and more accessible and hundreds of kind of online tutorials for any freaking thing you'd want. So the barrier of entry has gotten lower, but I don't think it kind of diminishes just how brutal it is to make a game. And I think especially as an indie developer, right? Like I'm not going to speak for you. I'm just going to speak for generally, and I'll let you kind of speak for your own experience. But like independently taking it on, we say independently, outside of the studio system, not just like a solo person, right? It's it's an extremely like exhausting thing because it's like you finish working on the thing that you're doing to keep the lights on, but then you're coming home and you're like, well, now that the lights are on, I can work on this a little bit easier. And then you're kind of just locked away, kind of chipping away at this thing that feels like insurmountable to a certain degree. Like I'm sure there's times where you're like, God damn it, this game's never making the light of day. Yeah, so you gotta take the time to kind of pat yourself on the back. What's your experience with kind of just going through the ringer with making a development or just making a game? I mean,
It is very much like you described, where especially with me with a day job that's also game development, you have the, 8 hours and then you come home and are you going to work another 8 hours on games? And some days are like that, but we have a very like no crunch attitude for our studio. Any extra work that is needed to be done, I sort of take that on myself. I know where that balance needs to be for my own life. Yeah, it can be difficult. It's not all fun and games making games, but it is very nice to be able to make something yourself and release it. We were always dedicated to releasing it eventually, and we're finally there.
Yeah, one key kind of takeaway that I've gotten from this conversation is that, you know, despite, personal troubles, global troubles, just the regular creative process troubles, that you and it sounds like your team are still hopeful about future projects, future ideas, and sticking, in the game industry. Because I think it's obviously a very topical conversation that we've been having for the last 2 years, but with the amount of layoffs and studio closures and all that sort of stuff, I mean, there's a lot of people just exiting and putting their hands up and being like, you know what, it isn't worth it anymore. And so, at least from my perspective as somebody that is, a massive fan of these games, that, has aspirations one day to contribute in a more significant way into the industry, it's like, it's nice to hear that people are still hopeful and excited about things to come, even, even when they put out, something that just consumed the better part of, the last large chunk of their time. Like, that's a good thing to hear, and I think a good thing to message to people, that it's like, hey, it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's still very exciting. I feel like I have ideas planned out for the rest of my life, and things might change. Though I imagine I'll still be creating for as long as I can. It's sort of like the advent of indie development now, where you have the AAA games that are sort of churning out these like annual games that maybe not much new is coming out, or filled with bugs and such. But there are a lot of indie teams who have this like great ideas and not enough opportunities to get it out in the world. But we'll definitely be creating more in the future.
Oh yeah, I think it's I'll kind of echo I think what Nick just said too, and there's this I think currently there's this fervent energy coming out of indie as like AAA is sort of like collapsing in on itself just from the scope of its the developments and everything. I think indie's just been like all these new ideas and stuff like that are coming out of indie games, and I think you guys, you're no exception. I think you're all kind of just you've made it, you've shipped the game, and here you are across the finish line, making sure that everything's going smoothly as you work on your next game. I hope you guys take the time. I think this is a point that, especially in the current industry, we want to make sure any kind of developer that comes onto the show, we want to say, huge congratulations, and like, you guys did the damn thing. So, take the time to celebrate it. Before we let you go, anything you want to say to the people, watching at home, maybe first time they're hearing about the Office type or anything like that?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you to everyone who supported the game over the course of its development. Thank you for being kind and supportive. There are many people who are saying you've made it, like take some time for yourself, and I'll do my best to do that. But still dedicated to shaping it up as best it can be. Any sorts of office themed comedy dating environment is your thing, please check out the Office Type. Available on Steam, Mac, and PC, as well as Android through Google Play. And yeah, let us
And
know
and
if you
and
stream it.
And how about you specifically? No, Jack, you the developer? Have you thought, like what? Do a little self plug before we end this episode.
Thank you to everyone for believing in me and my idea. My team, all the community and the fans. It's very strange to see something I've thought about for so long in people's hands, and for people to then enjoy it. And it means a lot to me personally.
Right on.
Well, actually, I have one more thing. All right, one more thing. For any other, no, not just. I'm not speaking for myself. Right, this is not selfish question. But for any other developers out there, perhaps maybe thinking about getting into visual novels, just give your best piece of advice, having worked on a visual novel. What do you have?
Don't burn yourself out.
Dang, there it is.
People working on indie games, it's this passion, usually behind the scenes of some other career. And there are a lot of people who have these like bright-eyed ideas at first, and then they try to make it work, try to fund it themselves, and it can be a struggle at times. but reaching the finish line is unreal. It's very cool to see the idea that you want to present to the world out in the world. And I feel like that's all worth it in the end.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of the Respawn Station podcast. Thank you so much for Jack for hopping on and having this conversation with us, letting us peel back the layers a little bit. Hopefully, obviously, this is gives people who are unfamiliar with the Office type a chance to actually hear about the game. But if you have already played it, I think that's now you get to a little bit of context of how it was made, and hopefully it enhances how much you enjoy it. Now you can go back for another playthrough and they different characters. Obviously, like Jack just said, the game is available now on Steam and Google Play Store. The links will be in the description below. You can check it out over there. As always, Nick, you're doing great. I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to talk about you anymore. I already did. So thanks for listening, and until next time, have a good night, a good morning, and a damn good time.